Chapter 3 Glacial Repose. Jordan sat in the darkened room, hopelessness swallowing him whole. His arms limp to the side, the gun on the ground next to him. The only light in this space shining through the doorway behind him. The dust and debris kicked up, now falling through a beam of light, creating vortexes of grief that reminded Jordan what happened here. William limped into the room with Jordan. The others stood in the entrance. William put his hand on Jordan's shoulder, the comforting words getting caught in his throat, unable to be uttered. Without saying anything, Jordan slowly stood up, his hands twisting around the stock of the rifle as he rose, his breath steady, with the ever so well hidden amount of turmoil seeping through. "We need to keep moving. We need to find a way out of here." Jordan's words now like steel. "I couldn't agree more. Let's get out of this hellhole," Rick responded. He wanted to say more, but his mind wouldn't let him. "Jordan, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Jennifer tried to ask, but was cut off by Jordan's silence as he moved further into the darkened room. The rest of the group followed behind in somber muteness, the sound of their boots against metal floor echoing throughout the room. When the last remnant of light from the doorway faded, Jordan and Rick both turned on their flashlights, the beam stretching out, revealing the space they'd found themselves within. It seemed to be a lab. Within this lab, there were once underlit tables, almost like a museum. A collection of what looked to be bones and stones sat on these stands, dust now smothering anything it could drape itself over. The only object the dust refused to touch was a bowling ball-sized chunk of what looked like saffron-coloured, semi-transparent glass, with an empty cavern in the centre of it, of something long and plated. Just beneath it was a small handwritten note that Otto moved to read. "Potential new species. Magachelia. It seems to look remarkably well preserved. Please perform all routine exams of the specimen before you perform any exams of the amber just in case of damage." Otto read the note with mild confusion, as when he looked back at the amber there was indeed damage to it, as the hole had been bored into the empty space. But it didn't look like it was made from a tool. It looked like something had chewed through it. Otto turned to the rest of the group, his finger to his lips, hushing the long dead air that the group was wading through. He pointed to the amber, then mimed something chewing. The group nodded, pushing onwards through the lab. More minerals and bones scattered, now, however, scattered around the floor as well as the tables. They all looked around, stopping every now and again to read little footnotes on some of the items, until William stopped dead in his tracks, and as silently as he could, tried to usher everyone else to his location. One by one, the group noticed William summoning them, and when they got to him, they all saw it. A collection of humanoid, ivory-coloured statues, knelt in reverence, some with their hands clasped, others with their arms raised above them. But the only thing they all seemed to share was a carving on their torso. It was a symbol of some kind, a collection of interlocking circles, almost floral-looking. The centre disc, and then 8 perfectly circular petals around it, carved deep into the chests of these statues. As the group inspected them, Jennifer noticed something about the statues. They didn't look like stone. These statues looked far too immaculately carved, having fingerprints, paws, even patterns to their iris. And as she got closer to study them, she saw that on the chest of one of the statues next to the symbol was a rectangle that didn't quite fit the design of the statues at all, but instead looked like someone had stuck a name tag on it. All the colour from Jennifer left her, leaving her paler than the statues. She fell backwards onto the ground, scrambling away from the statues, as she realised what they were. The group ran to check on her, all except Otto. Instead of checking on Jennifer, he was tracing his fingers over the symbol. The material that these figures were made of felt dry, somewhat coarse, and surprisingly porous. As Otto's digits ran across the off-white, slightly pinkish material, he stopped on the symbol. As he did so, his vision blurred, flashes of the statue under the lake forcing its way into his mind. Initially, Otto was tensing out of the pain and surprise, but after he saw that face again, his tension melted. His breath slowed, he opened his eyes, and he was back looking at the symbol again. Just beneath the symbol was a rib cage, and the ever so slight feeling of a heartbeat, pounding within, trying to break out. Otto removed his hand from the chest, stood and moved to Jennifer and the others. "Jennifer, are you okay?" Otto asked, putting his hand on her shoulder. Yes, I am fine. We need to keep moving is all. We need to try and find at least one of the lead researchers. Or just need to find a way out of here safely." Her words shaky, clearly drunk with anxiety. "Agreed. We need to try and get to the main research area. I think if we leave this lab, the corridor ahead will split into another small lab or the main site, so we need to head there," William said, trying to recall the blueprints of the building that were in his backpack. That remained in the blood-soaked forest was Dr. Ravina Evans. They all nodded and carried on moving through the lab, further into the complex. The metal door of this lab looked like it had been hit by a cannon. The center of the door warped and dented so much so, the top right corner was stretched out, trying to avoid the damage. But instead, now the door hung open, the right corner now looking more like a cadaverous finger pointing further into the godless dark throat of the building. Everyone saw this, and they all felt they shouldn't go further. They all stood in the doorway, watching the darkness watching them in return. A standoff between those whose job it is to try and save people, and somewhere that even old Nick would consider too reprehensible. That was until they heard it. A scream. A bone-chilling, blood-curdling cry for help echoing through the hallway. Without hesitation, Rick and Jordan started booking it down the hallway, forcing the rest of the group to follow them, as if those two left, then no light would be able to keep the Umbra at bay. They all rushed as fast as they could down the hallway, Rick and Jordan stopping every now and again, to both allow everyone else who was supporting William to catch up, but also to stop and listen for more yelling. Eventually they got to a door at the end of the hallway, far past the one that leads to the main site, but it was undeniable that the cries for help were coming from beyond this door. "Are we going in here, or are we going back to the main site?" William asked, winded. "There is someone in there. We need to see if we can help them. Even if it isn't who we were sent to find, we need to save someone." Jordan spoke up, his words catching. He was clearly fighting something back. "Okay, you're right. We need to save someone," William replied, tapping Jordan on the back, and started to move towards the door, slowly reaching for the door handle, and slowly opening the door to be as quiet as possible. The door swung open with a dampened creak, unveiling another lab. However, the roof of this lab had collapsed, allowing the pale rays of sunlight to claw its way into the room, like silver spears fighting back whatever evil was in this place. The light scattered down to the floor, where the rubble of the roof lay dead. A woman, dressed in a long, tattered lab coat, making it look like the train of a wedding dress, perched on top of the corpus. She knelt, staring up to the sky, every so often screaming, her vocal cords clearly tearing, as blood could be heard pooling at the back of her throat. Her screams started to be muffled, as the dancing droplets started to froth and bubble from her mouth and flow down her cheeks. William entered the threshold of the door, hands outstretched to show he wasn't a threat. Everyone else followed suit. He approached slowly, making sure not to startle the poor woman. God only knows how long she's been here, and not even God himself could know what she has seen. William knew that he himself was teetering on the edge of mental fracture, and this woman was clearly past that. The group moved on, still methodically moving further into the space, their attention all focused on the woman in front of them, causing them not to see what was on the wall behind them and around the doorway. Countless scrawlings of the same symbol, the crazed calligraphy following it that read Crater D. Boida Nader, and countless remains of lab workers that lay against the wall with dried, bloodied scratch marks above them, some of which still had nails that held firm in the metal long after they were peeled off the body. Otto was the first to start moving forward. He could sense something was wrong. That was, before he had the vision of the lake statue, but now also the phrase, Crater di Boida Nader. So he stopped, and called out to the rest of the group, "Everyone stop! Something is wrong." His words a whispered hiss. Jennifer was the second to stop, but she turned to look at Otto, which led her vision to crash against the visage on the wall behind everyone. "Do not get any closer to her. She isn't... whatever it isn't human. Do not get close to it. Just stop moving, and do not turn around." Her words dripped with fear. One by one, the group stopped. William, then Rick. But Jordan kept moving, the symphony of already broken glass under his feet as he pushed forward. Jordan, stop. "We don't know what this thing is. We need to leave," William said, trying to tangle Jordan's feet from afar with his words. "Jordan, please. Stop. I am not stopping. I am not losing her again. She is hurt, but she isn't dead. I'm going to grab her, and I'm going to leave this God-forsaken building." Jordan's inflection sounded wrong. It was all over the place, like it was something mimicking human speech. Or it could have just been grief drowning his words. Either way, he wasn't stopping. He got to the base of the slain scrap heap and started to climb it. It wasn't particularly tall, only around 8 or 10 feet, and there was enough pieces of metal that stuck out that built a clear set of stairs. It would be easy enough to climb. But for whatever reason, Jordan's movements started to weaken. His arms would go limp, and then go back to working fine. Then his legs, and then sometimes his neck would go, and his head would fall back nearly completely against his spine, allowing the group to see that his eyes had formed a glossy, clouded patina. But with his motor function stopping and starting, it was causing him to trip and stumble, cutting himself on jagged spikes of metal. One particularly nasty wound nearly degloved his forearm. He caught the skin just below his wrist on a small nail or screw, but instead of stopping and removing the scrap from his wrist, he just kept moving, causing the skin to pull and tear, and eventually snapping the metal it was attached to off the pile. The rest of the team started to chase him, but as they approached, Jordan's movement sped up. William started to climb up after him, but with his already injured leg, was considerably slower. Otto stopped to make sure that William didn't get any more hurt than he already was. Rick and Jennifer shot up the heap with very little issue. A few cuts and bruises here and there, but nothing a tetanus shot wouldn't fix. So they both clawed their way up, trying to reach Jordan. But Jordan crested the scrap heap before them. When Rick and Jennifer got to the top, they saw Jordan holding the tattered train of lab coat from the woman. She didn't move. Didn't react at all to any of them. She just screamed. Jordan was now weeping openly, patting the coat, mumbling apologies to it. "I'm sorry, girl. I should have tried to stop it hurting you. I'm so sorry, Roxy." Rick and Jennifer moved closer, until they got close enough to see the woman's name tag. Dr. Jackie Marsh, lead paleontologist. They could also now see her legs, or the lack thereof, rather. Her torso just ended. It stopped just above her pelvis and sunk into the metal. Was it metal? It looked like it could be. Hard, smooth, rusted metal maybe, with 2 long jointed pieces of rebar that were twitching. Before they could finish their thought, Jordan had moved ever so slightly. His foot touched Dr. Jackie Marsh, and as soon as he did, her head snapped down to him, the frothed blood spitting out and cascading down his back. As it did so, the heap started to rumble, pieces of rusted metal scraping against others, forcing William and Otto to get back to the ground and move away, and almost causing Rick and Jennifer to fall off. The rumbling continued, and got more and more violent, until those two large pincers from before burst from underneath the pile, and that same chitinous body and needle-like legs writhed outwards and skewered Jordan through his sides, lifting him up and holding him tight, the sounds of ribs breaking making the lab like a concert hall. From the other side of the metal grave came a giant chitinous head, two large mandibles attached to the front, followed by large antennae and a set of mirror-like complex insectoid eyes. Dr. Jackie sunk as the creature moved, revealing she had fused with one of the plates in the middle of this monster, becoming some sort of vestigial brood on this creature's back. With the mountain of metal sinking, it forced Rick and Jennifer to leap down to the ground. As they did so, they watched as the creature brought Jordan closer to its mandibles, inspecting him, before it sunk one of them into his eye with surgical precision. Jordan's eye collapsed almost instantly, the creature moving its mouthparts in his now leaky socket, until it removed them, holding what can only be described as Jordan's iris. It brought the iris down to the luan on its back, handing it to her, as Dr. Jackie took it and laced a piece of sodden and rotting thread through it. The creature repeated this again. Jordan, however, was not screaming or crying for help. Instead, he continued to apologize, reaching his hands out to the head in front of him, the giant insect watching his arms move, pausing for just a moment, before penetrating Jordan's arms with its fangs, holding them still so that it could start to consume them. The sounds of bones cracking and squelching flesh made the group sick, but snapped them out of their torpor. William grabbed Otto and Rick grabbed Jennifer as they all ran backwards towards the door, the creature now starting to tear at Jordan's stomach. As the group ran, the sound of Jordan's lower body thudding against the metal floor boomed down the hallway behind them. They got to the main site doorway, William frantically rattling the handle trying to open the door, but finding it locked. Jennifer pulling the gun from her hip, firing at where the strike plate is, blowing a chunk out of the metal doorway, the door swinging open with everyone pushing into the room. Jordan's muffled apologies now falling silent. Rick placed himself in front of the door, temporarily blocking it as he scanned the place they'd just entered. A small bridge room that was clearly used as somewhere researchers would clock in and out. There wasn't anything major to block the door with, but there were some chairs that Rick pointed at, trying to command everyone to hand him, and while his voice failed him, everyone understood what he was asking for. So, the group collected the chairs and built a makeshift barricade in front of the door, to try and have some sort of defense against anything that would try and get in. "What the fuck just happened?" William asked, as he slid down to the floor after placing the last chair. Magnachilia. Jennifer sat, muttering to herself, trying to soothe the shock that was welling in her chest.
"I don't know what the fuck that was, but I say fuck saving people. I say we burn this place to the ground and say we couldn't save anyone."
Rick spoke with boiling venom, the fear in his voice hiding behind it. "While I agree, we cannot simply burn this place down. How would we explain the length of our absence? And how would we explain the loss of Jordan?" Otto replied, removing his glasses and rubbing his eyes. I vote burn the place down. Surely this place has a kind of self-cleanse type of protocol. That's a thing, right? Like an immolation cleanse? William's words were shaky and unsure, but still poorly feigning calmness and rationality. "Magnachilia! The great pincers! That is what that means. Which means that whatever that thing was survived the ember and grew." Jennifer's epiphany was broadcast for everyone. Is that even possible? I don't know why I'm asking. With everything we've seen, I wouldn't be surprised if pigs started to fly. William chuckled to himself. "I don't know how it's possible, but clearly it is. That is what worries me. If that thing is here, what else could be around us? And with how fast it killed Jordan, I don't know how we are going to get out of this." Tears welling in Jennifer's eyes as she spoke. "I hate to say this. I think we need to keep moving. I know that we are all scared and deeply saddened, but the longer we stay, the more likelihood that something will find us," Otto declared as he stood, gently placing his glasses back on. "As much as I hate to agree, I ain't going back out that fucking door." Rick sighed as he stood and tapped William and Jennifer on their backs, gently urging them to both stand with him. They both hesitantly did so, even though their legs were trying to betray them, and bolt them to the ground. They both were more scared of something finding them rather than them finding something else. So they all stood, their shaky breaths being banished by resolve or stupidity. Whatever it was, it allowed them to leave the bridging room into the main site. The room that welcomed them was nothing like they'd expected. Rather than the plain metal they'd all been cocooned in for the majority of their time, the main site kept the metal dome roof, but everything else from the floors to the walls was closer to a small ecosystem. Loam and grass settled on the floor, jagged peaks of metal monoliths reaching to the roof, trying to connect with the only metallic relative that was left. The last memory of what was once walkways that served researchers, now nothing more than grow beams for moss. The walls caked in moss and fungal growths, the metal transfigured into bark, and in the centre of this room, that tore everyone's attention towards it, was a hole. The mine that the researchers had made. Flickering whispers of jade brushstrokes, dappled with amethyst threads, waving out of the hole in pulses, all dancing around the heart of a dead titan, the all-consuming mouth of a star that was put to rest. The group couldn't look away. The question of how now lost all its meaning. They could only accept what was in front of them as fact. If they tried to think of it as anything more than purely observationally, they would snap. But Otto was inquisitive by nature. He couldn't help himself but wonder how or why. He took 2 steps forward, gazing into the eye of destruction, the twisting vines of green and purple encasing him in wonder. The more he looked, the more he saw the symbol from the statues, the face from the lake, the words, Creature di Boydunanader. He saw things that he didn't think was possible. He could see knowledge, memory, evolution, until nothing. The event horizon vanished, leaving nothing but the pulsing of the Viridian and Violet ballet as they fell back down into the orifice of the mine. In and out? William asked, a nervous titter escaping his mouth. In and out, Rick repeated with a comforting smile. Just gotta find a way down. There's probably an elevator or something. I can't imagine a bunch of researchers hauling themselves down on ropes. Like animals released into the wild, the group slowly edged their way further into the biodome. The same alien flowers that were in the hallway, blanketed over the loam and sodden ground. The flowers' gaze following the four as they trudged through the foliage. The plant life only got more bizarre and unusual the closer they got to the crevice. Grass that twisted and coiled at the slightest touch. Fungi that looked like closed umbrellas stabbed into the ground. Giant conical trunks of spores, with leafage sprouting from the top of it. How fascinating. The fungal life here seems to be hugely diverse, Otto said, leaning into many different types of mushroom growths, using his pencil as a tool to examine the life. Otto, we've just been through hell. Don't touch things when you don't know what they are, Rick chastised Otto, grabbing at his shoulder. But as Rick stepped closer to Otto, the fungi around them seemed to sense their proximity, opening their parasol-shaped bodies and releasing a smog of spores into the air. The group, now coughing and spluttering, moved away from the spores as fast as they could, but each time they opened their eyes, their spores would colonize their sight, causing them to stumble over themselves and each other, causing a chain reaction of people bumping into more mushrooms and causing more spores to plume into the surrounding area. The group was now breathing in so many spores, it felt like they were drowning. The moisture in their throat and lungs causing the dry fungal seeds to clump and thicken, their breath becoming shallow. Rick tried to run out of the spore cloud, picking a direction and running. Jennifer got low to the ground, covering her airways, pulling William down with her. But Otto didn't try and run. He instead kept on looking at the plants. As they watched him back, the seed cloud still slowly suffocating, until his lips went blue, and he hit the ground unconscious. After the cumulus spores dissipated, Jennifer and William slowly stood up, coughing up clumps of dough-like mucus. Rick approached, doing the same, spitting as he walked. As they all looked around and saw Otto, face down in the dirt, they realized that whatever was in those spores, they were having some sort of mild reaction to. Their vision was warping and going in and out of focus. Their knees felt weak. The colourful plants around them looked more vibrant than before, and their minds felt completely clear, and as quickly as the effect showed up, they were gone. to a degree. They all felt a little disorientated afterwards, but other than that, everything was back to normal. While this was happening, Otto had started to stir, the visions of before calling to him, a deep, melodic voice worming its way into his unconscious mind, the giant eye from the lake staring into the very fabric of his being. But then, the visions changed. It showed Otto returning from the island, showing his discoveries, becoming more and more well known as the man who discovered countless new scientific landmarks and research. More notoriety, more adoration, no more fear, no more insecurities, only respect. He awoke, his eyes clogged with dirt, which he wiped away as he stood. He turned to find the rest of his team, and they weren't there. No one was. He was alone in the biodome. William? Rick? Jennifer? Otto called out, his voice faltering ever so slightly. There was no response. He moved closer to the crater in the center, calling out as he did so. As he got to the edge, there was still no sight of anyone. He peered out over the side of the hole, staring down on the cobalt-coloured pit, the ice of the walls gleaming. He lifted his head, scanning around to see if he could see any evidence they'd gone down without him. There was nothing. But he did spot that in amongst the dense foliage of the glade, there was a small lump next to the pit, like when ivy grows over a man-made structure. He edged his way over to it, pulling back the flora to reveal a small control panel for something. He pulled a small pocket knife from his waist and started to cut through it to get a cleaner image of what the controls were. After sawing through the stems, he had managed to clear enough of the control panel to see what it was connected to. A compact mining lift. He flipped a switch, and the sound of a generator humming kicked up. The platform he was stood on shuddered as the power was now turned on, 2 small buttons flickering to life. But what caught Otto's attention was the faint sound of something mumbling, and the sound of shambling footsteps approaching him. He leaned back to get a clear view out of the grotto, and he froze. There, approaching him, was some sort of humanoid figure. Rotten and festered, it was covered in roots and mould, its blood had long dried up. Its jaw had been shattered, hanging at an angle, like a photo of their last moments. And the top left side of its head had been burst open, turning itself into a home for a large bell-shaped plant. Otto watched as it staggered closer and closer. I don't know if you can hear me, but stay back. I have a gun, Otto called out, praying that whatever it was still had some semblance of humanity. The being didn't respond, only getting closer, its faint, garbled moans falling from its hanging jaw. His breath quickly turning into sharp, shallow, stochastic inhales, he pulled a small pistol from his satchel, his hands shaking as he turned into the line of sight of the creature, nervously took aim, his arms swaying. He pulled the trigger, his eyes reflexively closing as the bang rang out. He opened his eyes and saw Jennifer in front of him, pained shock drawn on her face, her eyes falling down to her torso, a small hole in her chest leaking poppy-coloured ink, saturating her shirt. As her legs started to give way, her breath became hollow. "Otto?" she asked, falling to the floor. Rick and William ran over as fast as they could, seeing what had happened. Otto caught with a smoking gun. William bolted straight for Jennifer, immediately putting as much pressure as he could on the gun wound, and doing his best to comfort her. Rick went straight for Otto, grabbed the pistol from him, threw the gun on the ground, and turned to Otto, grabbing him by the shoulders, trying to talk to him. "Otto! Otto, what happened? What happened, Otto?" Rick tried to command the answer out of Otto, but terror clearly flowing through him, trapping him in his own mind. Rick, realizing that Otto was out of it, lifted his arm and brought it down to connect with Otto's cheek, the sting snapping Otto back to life. "Otto, what happened?" Rick asked, shaking Otto's shoulders. I don't know. I didn't know. Otto mumbled as he looked down at the floor. "Rick, I need help. She isn't looking good," William barked. Jennifer lay on her back. Her legs felt like they were napalm. Her legs were beyond listening to her commands now. She stared at the roof of the biodome, She watched above her as the stars became visible in the sky. She could feel the plants around her moving slowly towards her, drawn to the warmth of her blood as it penetrated the soil. And as she took everything in, she craned her neck and called out to Otto. "Otto, come here, please," her voice weak but kind. Otto, still in denial, sheepishly made his way over, kneeling down next to her, avoiding her gaze like the plague. She lifted her arm and placed her hand on his knee, pearls of pain gathering in her eye, flowers and weeds now migrating onto her legs, slowly blanketing her in vegetation, her pain subsiding as it did so. "Otto, I don't believe you did this on purpose. I don't think that I'll be okay after this. Feels pretty final," she said with a slight chuckle, coughing up a trickle of blood as she did so. "What happened, Otto? It wasn't... You weren't... I didn't know it was you. It was an accident. I'm so sorry," Otto said, still avoiding eye contact. Jennifer nodded, the flora now reaching her stomach. The pain was now gone entirely, but still unable to move, her vision warping and twisting. The plants had clearly injected some kind of painkiller into her system as they started to assimilate her. "It's okay. All of the things we have seen here, it is probably the best way to go. Don't forget me, Otto. You all need to find a way to stop whatever is happening here. Don't let me die in vain." As she spoke, the plant life moved further and further up her body, the last thing she saw being the moon emerging from a cloud, and the stars twinkling, beckoning her back into the cosmos. With her final breath drawn, the flowers concealing her body, from the wound in her sternum, a large, thorned stem sprouted, growing instantaneously, and blooming into a large, crimson, octet tansy, towering over the other greenery, leaning its flowers to Otto. The trio, now bathed in silent sadness. William knelt, head in hands. Rick was stood above them, one hand on his hip, the other rubbing the bridge of his nose. And Otto sat, staring at the ground next to Jennifer's grave. He was lightheaded, his vision faltering, breath sharp and rapid. And as he looked up, he saw the tansy staring back at him, the vision of the lake flashing in his mind, now matching his breath, image after image with no break. Otto stood rigid, but somehow limp. Not saying anything, he moved to the mining elevator, picked up his pistol, and pressed the button to go down. William and Rick turned to look at him as he descended, racing towards the metal shutters. "Otto, what the fuck are you doing?" William yelled. Otto said nothing.
"Don't be stupid, you don't know what's down there,"
Rick scolded. Otto, still not responding, got off the lift at the bottom and started to march onwards into the mine shaft, William and Rick having to search for the controls to bring the elevator back up. After tearing through the vegetation that concealed the lift before, they eventually managed to find the button, brought it back up, and made their way down to the cave system. The labyrinth they had set foot in was vast, a twisting network of glacial blue walls, like a mirror maze. Small mining lanterns decorated the roof of the cave as trail markers. Rick and William started to make their way further into the network of tunnels. As they moved away from the open pit entrance, the cobalt walls of this place became nondescript, each one looking more like the last. "Otto?" William called out, his voice echoing off the frigid surroundings. There was no reply. William and Rick pushed forward, pistol and shotgun drawn, ready for if something jumped out at them. As they went further into the cave, it opened into a cavernous room, clearly man-made, tools and machinery rusted and worn. 2 tables, carved from the ice in the center of the room, with small metal placards on the front of them. one labelled Canis duris, and the other labelled Megaloceros gigantus, though nothing remained on the table, bar a few stray hairs that had frozen onto the slab of ice. "What the fuck?" William asked, rubbing the hairs in between his fingers.
"What? What's the matter?"
Rick questioned, looking over William's shoulder. "Well, these samples are from an extinct species, direwolf and Irish elk, which isn't too crazy to find in permafrost. But what is strange is that the clumps of fur embedded here have leftover tissue samples. I don't think a group of researchers would damage specimens like this. Unless... Oh my god. We need to find Otto now and get out of here. Fuck trying to blow this up, we just need to leave," William said frantically, immediately starting to rush through the room, further into the network of corridors. Rick, still a little confused, followed after him. Running through the cave, they were both calling out to Otto, still with no luck of finding him. Corridor after corridor, room after room, finding nothing but corpses of researchers preserved by the cold. That was until they came across another cavernous space, much larger than the ones prior. Otto stood in the middle of this place, facing away from them both, mumbling something to himself and twitching. "Otto? Otto, are you okay?" "It's okay, it was an accident." "Come on, let's get out of here." William's words were soft and comforting, trying to get Otto's attention. He didn't react, continuing to mumble and twitch. "Otto, we really need to leave. Come on," William said, now cautiously stepping towards Otto. Otto still not reacting, only twitching more violently as William approached, until it looked like Otto was convulsing. William reached out and placed his hand on Otto's shoulder, and as soon as he made contact, Otto let out a sharp exhale, turning around, clearly hyperventilating. "Where? How?" Otto stuttered, his face pale. "It doesn't matter. All that matters is that we get out of here," William said, trying to soothe Otto. As William was rubbing Otto's back, he failed to notice what was on the wall that Otto was staring at. Rick, however, did see it. The wall that Otto was facing moments before wasn't ice, like every other wall in this cave. The wall in front of Otto was that porous, ivory material that the statues in the lab were made from. And on this wall was a giant ear, easily the size of a bus, while Rick was in awe at this monolithic auditory organ. He saw a slight twitch come from it. It moved. Surely the trick of the brain. It couldn't move. It was made of stone. But maybe it can? The logical side of Rick's brain was fighting claw and tooth to rationalize what he was seeing, and still attempting to do the same with everything else he had seen. That was until he heard something, from the frozen hallway behind him. A slow, echoing click, as he turned to see what it was. He saw the elk from before, staring back at him, unblinking, more of the symbols and idols in its fur and antlers than when he saw it last. Rick remembered everything that had happened ever since they all saw this elk before. The pain, the death, and the anguish. He raised his shotgun, aiming squarely for the head, cocked the hammer, his hands shaking. The elk stood not moving, his breath now growing faster and faster. Rick didn't shoot. He brought the shotgun down, slowly lifted the hammer. A heavy sigh tumbled from his chest, a small smirk creeping up his face. "Will, you want to take a crack at this?" Rick was cut off. Otto had ran towards him, ripping the shotgun out of his hand, taking aim at the elk, and a deafening crack rang out in the cave. The elk's head nearly completely blown off as it slumped down to the ground.
"Otto, what the fuck is your problem, you stupid prick?"
Rick boomed, as his fist connected with Otto's cheek. The sound of bone breaking, dancing after the echoing blast. Otto fell to the ground, dropping the gun, which Rick promptly picked up, aiming it at him.
"Give me one good reason why I shouldn't put you down right now."
"Rick, don't. It's only the three of us left now. We need as many people as possible," William said shakily, trying to calm Rick down.
"No, Will. He's done nothing but fuck us over every chance he gets. Let's not forget he killed Jennifer, and has probably killed us too with that fucking stunt."
Rick's anger was tangible, the barrel of the gun getting closer to Otto, pinning him to the ground. Otto began to weep, but his face didn't move an inch.
We were all dead as soon as we got off the plane. I have seen it. I know its plans. And we can do nothing now to stop it. We have lost.
Otto wept as he looked up to the others. What are you talking about? William asked, edging closer.
The rabbits have walked into the wolf's den. The chickens who opened the coop to the fox. We are the fish that swim into the mouth of a shark. None of us will get off this island. We are trapped here. Why do you think we didn't leave straight away? We could have left as soon as we entered, but we stayed. We moved further into the trap. And all I have done, in a moment of lucidity, is try and make things as fast and painless as possible for us all. They know where we are, and they are almost here. You both can either join me in acceptance, or try and fight it, and die a far, far more painful death.
Otto said all of this still weeping, but now a sorrowful smile carved its way onto his face. The sound of footsteps came from the hallway behind the dead elk. Rick and William looking at each other, both thinking about what Otto said, both paralyzed with fear.
I will see you both in another life, hopefully one that is less cruel than this one. Don't fight it. Make the right choice.
Otto's statement, conveying an undeniable promise of finality, as he brought the pistol to his chin, cocked the hammer, looked up at the icy sky above him, tears streaming from his eyes.
I will see you soon, Jennifer.
The bang that followed sang across the walls of the cavern, as the one behind Otto was now painted with his final thoughts, as he collapsed to the floor.
Holy fuck,
Rick yelled, having to turn away, the sound of footsteps now spreading from the labyrinth behind them. There was nowhere for them both to go. This was the final room in the chamber. That was until Rick thought about the ear. Why was Otto talking to it? It couldn't be. He rushed over to the ear, shining his flashlight at it. And amazingly, it had an ear canal. Easily big enough for them both to fit through, but too large to see where it led.
Will, here,
Rick shouted. Oh, for fuck's sake. William sighed as he ran over and started to climb into the ear. As William entered, Rick was forced to wait outside, allowing him to see Dr. Ravina Evans once again, followed by the same pack of people as before. She stopped and knelt next to the headless elk, looked up at Rick, who was holding the weapon that did this, and pointed at him. As soon as she did so, the sound of arrows whistling filled the room. Rick managed to duck out of the way in time as he reloaded his gun, and jumped back up, shooting twice into the crowd, missing a couple of people, but hitting one square in the chest, taking them down, and using that chaos, dove into the ear canal behind William. Scrambling as fast as he could forward, pushing William to go faster, they both crawled as fast as they could, through the ever-tightening canal, their breath becoming more shallow and controlled. Rick could hear the bowman behind him, following them. Suddenly, William hit a smooth, elastic membrane of some kind that blocked their path, and with the looming threat of people following them, William reached into his boot and pulled out his knife and sliced through it. A thick, green paste oozing from it. They carried on until they came across a downward slope in the floor. Since it was the only way to go, they slid down as carefully as they could, the walls oddly moist in this area. They carried on as cautiously as they could, until Rick felt a sharp pain in his ankle, as one of the people following them had plunged a makeshift dagger into him. With his yelp of pain, he let go of the walls, forcing him to fall and knock into William, causing them both to plummet out into the unknown space. They both hit the dampened ground with a crunch, William's already injured shoulder popping back out of place, and Rick's wrist bending back against his forearm, snapping it. Their groans of pain floating through the darkened space, as they both moved to a sitting position. Before they could catch their breath, however, the person that stabbed Rick also fell from the shaft above them. Another crunch echoed as they landed, as their torso bent to an unnatural angle. Now unable to stand, the person started crawling towards Rick with their weapon drawn. Rick hobbled to his feet and put the barrel up against the back of their head and fired. Their head now pulp on the ground around them.
Fucking god damn it, Rick exclaimed. I'm fucking sick of this shit.
Same here, William whined. I don't know where we can go. They both looked around, Rick illuminating the space as best he could. They could see 3 other holes, 2 in front of them and 1 behind them. That was a completely vertical drop, further into the unknown. The sounds of more of those people scraping against the cave walls above them getting louder. We need to pick a way to go, now, William said. I can't walk much. I think Otto was right, Rick sighed as he slowly reloaded his gun. Maybe we ain't making it out. I'm running out of shells, my wrist is fucked, and I can't put weight on my ankle. I think I'm dying here. What the fuck, Rick? Don't say that. We can, the 2 holes. Maybe they'll go. William's words were desperate. He couldn't accept what Rick was saying. Look, Will, I ain't going out like a chump. If you want to try one of these doors to hell, be my guest. I'll do my best to hold them off. At least, I might be able to save you. Rick chuckled. He was deflated. He wanted this nightmare to end, and he knew this was the easiest way. And it would be a good deed at the same time. Rick, But William couldn't finish the words. Fear was rattling him to his very core, as he stood there, frozen. Another one of the people dropped down from above, Rick shooting them in the chest straight away. But as soon as William saw the people descending, his body moved before his mind. He had started running away, heading towards the hole behind Rick. More and more people were now falling. Rick shooting another, clubbing others with the stock of his gun. Come on, you fuckers! Rick roared as he fought, but eventually there were too many. Daggers sinking into his stomach, arrows piercing his chest. He fought until he couldn't. He lost his footing, falling back onto the ground. One of the people wielding a dagger clambered on top of him, and with his last moments, he watched William running towards the hole, not looking back. Get out of here, Rick whispered to himself, as the dagger was brought down into his eye and into his brain, as he watched William jump into the hole as his life was snuffed out. William leaped into the darkened hole, before even looking where it led. This hole was by far the longest and most dangerous, and deep down William knew that. He could have gone for the smaller set of holes, but for some reason he chose this one. The one he couldn't see down, the one that led somewhere that even God can't see. William slid down the shaft, picking up quite a bit of speed, until he fell out into a vast open chamber. His fall was cushioned by a large circular dais. As soon as he hit the platform, there was a sickening crescendo of splintering bone and tearing flesh. His femur had exploded outward, cutting through his inner thigh. William lay, face up in pain, blood now pooling underneath him. His legs, no more useful than a candle with no wick. As he lay on this dais, he couldn't see much, but wherever he was, reeked of sour dairy and iron. He used his remaining strength to sit up and survey his surroundings. The dais was encircled by green, stagnant water. The walls were a slick maroon, and the most noticeable thing was the rotting remains of a person also on the dais. William crawled towards the corpse, his now exterior bones scraping against the stone beneath him, a stream of blood following behind. When he got to the body, he saw that it was that of a researcher. As he looked closer, he saw the name on the tag. One Dr. Edwin Noel. His legs were also dust, but he was also riddled with arrows, knife wounds, and bite marks. And next to him, written in blood, was a note. William picked up the note. It read, "If you are reading this, we are both dead. In our hubris, we tried to make humanity a god, but instead awoke something we cannot understand. I led the charge, and I paid the ultimate price for it. There isn't a way out of here. Eventually, we will all die. And this thing will spread beyond the boundaries of this island. Scorched earth is the only way to slow whatever this is. We should have left this island a long time ago. I am so sorry to my fellow researchers, and to everyone else on Earth. I have released Armageddon onto you all, and there is no way for me to stop it." William read this note and started to laugh.
Not a joyful laugh, but a defeated one. As his laughter echoed through the muggy chamber, small yellow veins of mold started inching towards him, embedding itself into his skin, with the mold clawing into any part of William's body that was exposed. A piece hit the base of his skull, and William passed out. When he opened his eyes, he was now floating in the lake, staring at the same statue he had just crawled into. But William could sense that it was communicating with him, the same way an animal knows when a person is talking to it. They don't understand what is being said, but they can recognize something is happening. The only thing was, William didn't know who here was the person and who was the animal. William listened, though. What else could he do? As he listened, memories from his mission shot into his mind. The campfire conversation, the monsters, his friends, how often he made himself small to avoid people asking him to do things, how often he was the first to run away, how he never chose to stay and help anyone, how William used his cowardice to hide his selfishness. All of these images replaying in his mind. William knew he was never a hero, nor was he lucky. He was just the person that could run faster than the others, and that was the only reason he made it this far. Jordan died trying to save what he thought was his dog. Jennifer was shot by the person she loved. Otto killed himself to escape the pain and torment of everything here. Rick died protecting William. And William will die because he ran away. Broke his legs and severed an artery. Nothing heroic, nothing commendable. In fact, William, being faced with all this, realized that he was the most like an animal out of everyone, trying to facilitate his own survival. He was a coward, surrounded by the brave. The face before him looked through him, like how William would look at an ant. "What do you want from me?" William yelled. "I just want to live." The statue did not react. William continued to shout and swear at the face before him, getting more and more annoyed, until he pulled his pistol and shot at it, the bullets pinging off the statue's face. It did, however, bring some sort of reaction. The eyes snapped to focus on William, staring at him, until he felt a sharp pain all over his body, the focal point being at the base of his skull. The pain grew and grew until it was white hot, like his entire body was filling with fire. William winced and groaned, his eyes slamming shut reflexively. Then, the pain disappeared, instead replaced with a cold gale wind. As William opened his eyes, he saw the snow. He was back outside. Where was he, though? All he could see was the snow blasting through the wind. That was, until he saw a dark green point slowly come into view. It seemed to get wider and wider. What was it? What was it? It was a tree. William realized this too late. He was falling from an ungodly height. The ground that he was so desperate to set foot on earlier now closing in. He was screaming, flailing in the air, trying to find a way to stop himself from becoming a fine pink streak in the snow. As he was flailing, he reached out towards the tree that he was plummeting towards, trying to grab it to slow his descent. As soon as he did, gravity reared its ugly head to remind him that isn't how things work. He clasped his hands around the thicker branch, the snap of muscle, bone and sinew, as his arms were torn from his body. Unsurprisingly, it did nothing to slow him down. Instead, it threw him into a spiral, hurtling towards the ground. In this moment, William knew he was going to die. There was no way around it, but he still didn't want that. If it was up to him, he would never have came here in the first place. It wasn't even a case that he needed the money. He just liked the idea of being known as the team who saved the Orion Sector. If he wasn't so clouded by his need for admiration, he would most likely be sat at home doing whatever he wanted. The more William thought about it, the funnier he found it. He wondered what would have happened if they left after they saw the elk the first time. If they ran back to the airfield after Otto was pulled out of the lake. All of these thoughts were pointless now, though. As with a splat, William hit the earth. The snow around him
now looking like a Picasso painting. The fine mist he turned into, freezing into snow instantly, dancing around the other snowflakes. As the snow danced, one snowflake caught on something. The fingers of a torn and bloodied severed hand that was perched in the snow. And as it waltzed away, joining the soiree of other snowflakes as they floated into the sky, they started hammering against the hull of a propeller plane, as more prey had found itself wandering into the belly of the beast.